Have you ever looked at someone and felt your soul lean forward before your mind could pull you back? It's like your heart knew them before you did, like it recognized something old, familiar, dangerous, and you let them in. Again. Even though your ribs still remember the last time you called that kind of chaos love. You've played this story before. Different face, same script. You give everything. They give just enough. You wait. They disappear. You ache. They never notice. And still, you crave their attention like oxygen. It doesn't matter how many times it's happened. Each time, it feels different until it doesn't. Until the mask slips and you're back in that quiet room, staring at your own reflection, wondering how the hell you fell for it again. That it's not stupidity. It's not weakness. It's a pattern, but not one you chose, because this goes deeper than what. It's wired into your bones, into the silent scripts you inherited before you could speak. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." So what if this isn't your desire at all? What if the one reaching for them isn't you? What if it's a forgotten version of you? The part that still believes pain is proof of love? And if that's true, who's really choosing? You didn't fall in love. You fell backward into something that already lived inside you. It wasn't their smile or the way they made you feel seen. Not really. It was the feeling they activated. A silent memory in your nervous system. A whisper that said, "This feels like home." But not the kind of home with warmth and safety. The kind of home where love was something you had to earn. Where affection came in crumbs. Where silence meant you did something wrong. Where being needed was the closest you ever got to being wanted. Carl Jung called this the repetition compulsion. The unconscious urge to recreate the emotional conditions of childhood. Not because they were good, but because they were known, familiar. Pain feels safer than unfamiliar peace. So you chase cold lovers, because once, a long time ago, love was cold. You and your criticism, because once, being criticized meant you were still seen. You stay in chaos, because once that's what connection felt like. It's not weakness. It's your nervous system trying to keep you alive. It learned to translate abandonment as love. It learned to find comfort in the ache, but that ache becomes a cage, because the wound you never asked for starts choosing for you, and every relationship becomes another desperate attempt to rewrite the ending. So tell me, how many times have you tried to heal a childhood ghost with an adult body? What if the person you fell for wasn't a person at all? What if they were a mirror, a living embodiment of everything you've tried to hide from the world and from yourself? Jung called it the shadow, the parts of you were taught to disown, the hunger, the fury, the need, the ache, the pieces that were too much, too loud, too soft, too real. So you buried them, but they never died. They waited. And then one day, they showed up at your doorstep, wearing someone else's face. That's why the toxic lover pulls you in like gravity. They don't just trigger you, they mirror you. Not the you you've built, but the one you've exiled. You hate how emotionally unavailable they are, but haven't you been hiding your own needs for years? You rage at their selfishness, but haven't you been taught to be selfless to the point of disappearing? You long for their love, but haven't you denied your own? They are the shadow lover, not because they're dark, but because they shine a light on the darkness you pretend isn't there. Falling for them is a seduction of the self, a pull back into wholeness disguised as heartbreak. But here's the danger: if you don't recognize the reflection, you'll mistake your own buried pain as someone else's power, and you'll keep loving your shadow instead of integrating it. If they hurt you, why can't you walk away? You've deleted their number, blocked them twice, whispered never again like a prayer through clenched teeth. But all it takes is one message, one glance, one memory, and you're right back inside the storm. This isn't just heartbreak, it's withdrawal, because your body has made them a drug. Their chaos floods your brain with cortisol and dopamine, highs when they pull you close, crashes when they vanish. Your nervous system gets hooked on the chase, not love, the survival of love. It's why calm people feel boring, why safety feels suspicious, why peace doesn't register as passion, because somewhere along the way, you learned that love isn't. Soft love is a war zone. It's screaming, then silence. It's losing yourself just to be chosen. You don't crave them. You crave the feeling of mattering, of being wanted, if only for how much pain you can hold. Nietzsche said, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." But you mistook chaos for depth. You believed. The ache made it real. You turned the abyss into an altar. And now, every calm shore feels fake. Because your nervous system only believes in hurricanes. But here's the truth. If pain is the only proof of love you recognize, you'll keep diving into the abyss, not to find them, but to find yourself, still drowning, waiting to be saved. You keep asking, what's wrong with me? But what if the one asking isn't really you? What if it's a child, not the one from the photos, but the one who still lives beneath your skin? The one who learned to read silence like a language, who felt invisible in a room full of people, who mistook emotional starvation for strength. Carl Jung said, "In every adult, there lurks a child, an eternal child, something that is always becoming, never completed, and calls for unceasing care. That child is still in you, not broken, not dramatic, just orphaned, not from a family, but from a feeling, the feeling of being fully seen, fully held, fully loved without needing to perform. You may be 30, you may be powerful, intelligent, resilient, but in the moments you chase those who abandon you, it's not your adult self who's running. It's the 7-year-old who still believes that if they just try harder, they'll finally be enough. So, when love disappears, it doesn't just hurt, it confirms the oldest belief: I must not be lovable. But hear this, that belief is not yours, it was installed, and the moment you see it, you don't need to be ruled by it, because you are not your loneliness. You are the one holding the loneliness now, and maybe for the first time, it's your turn to stop running toward abandonment and start walking back to yourself. At some point, it stopped being about them. And started being about what you were willing to sacrifice, just to feel loved. You said yes when you wanted to say no. You apologized for emotions you had every right to feel. You shrank so they could shine. You made yourself smaller, quieter, softer, until even you couldn't recognize the shape of your own soul. This is the cost no one talks about. Not just the heartbreak, but the erosion, the slow, silent betrayal of self. Carl Jung called it a psychic split, when the desire to be accepted overpowers the need to be authentic, when you trade your truth for their touch, when you exile parts of yourself to belong to someone else. But belonging bought through self-abandonment is never real. It's a performance, and the applause never lasts. Every time you ignore that inner no, every time you let someone cross the boundary you swore you'd hold, a crack forms in your sense of self, and eventually, you're not sure who you are anymore. You only know how to be what someone else wants. That's not love, that's emotional shape-shifting. That's survival disguised as connection. But here's the ache beneath the ache. The one person you needed to stop abandoning you was you. And maybe the real heartbreak isn't that they left. It's that somewhere along the way, you left yourself first. You told yourself they just needed more love, more patience, more understanding. So you gave until you bled, believing that if you could just heal them, they'd finally love you right. But here's the truth, you weren't trying to fix them. You were trying to fix something else. Something older, something deeper, something that didn't even begin with them. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This wasn't fate, it was familiar. You see, the urge to save is often the wound speaking. Not your wisdom, not your love, but the part of you still stuck in a story that never had a proper ending. You thought that if you could love someone who reminded you of the person who hurt you, you could finally rewrite the past. You could reverse the abandonment, prove your worth, earn what should have been freely given. But people are not projects, they are mirrors. And when you make it your mission to rescue them, you abandon the one person who truly needs saving. You. This is the myth of fixing them. You're not mending their cracks. You're trying to reach the child version of you through someone else's chaos. But trauma can't be rewritten through another person's healing. It must be rewritten through your own. And the longer you stay to save them, the longer you delay saving yourself. You didn't fall in love with them. You fell in love with what you saw in them, or rather, what you needed to see. In Jungian psychology, this is projection, the unconscious act of casting your inner world onto someone else, then mistaking the reflection for reality. You didn't see their wounds, you saw their potential. You didn't see the chaos. You saw a future where they'd finally be whole. You didn't fall for who they were. You fell for who they could be if they healed. But here's the heartbreak: they never do. Not because they can't, but because it's not their journey to fulfill your fantasy. You projected your unmet longings, your hidden worth, your buried light, and called it connection. You imagined they could make you feel whole, because deep down you were still afraid to hold that wholeness alone. So you saw a depth where there was dysfunction. You saw sensitivity in their silence, strength in their avoidance, wisdom in their wounds. But you weren't loving them, you were loving a version of you that never got to exist. Jung said, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. Because until you see clearly, you will keep falling in love with your own reflection and calling it fate. The danger of projection is not just that you misjudge them, it's that you abandon the truth for the comfort of your illusion. It doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like death. The silence is deafening. The absence feels like a limb cut off. You miss the highs, the fire, the pull, even the pain. Because when chaos has been your compass, stillness feels like being lost. But what if that emptiness isn't emptiness? What if it's space? Space your soul has never been allowed to inhabit until now. Carl Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And this withdrawal is your first breath of consciousness. You're not failing. You're healing. Your nervous system is learning how to exist without adrenaline, without emotional roller coasters, without needing to earn love, just to feel alive. At first, it's unbearable. Not because you miss them, but because you're meeting yourself again, without the distraction of their chaos. And for the first time, you begin to hear your own voice, soft, uncertain, but real. You start to choose silence over chasing, boundaries over begging, peace over performance. Withdrawal is not the end, it's the initiation, the sacred unraveling of who you had to be, so you can remember who you truly are. And no, it won't happen overnight. But every time you choose not to return to the fire that burned you, you stitch another thread back into the fabric of your soul. You stop reaching for the one who left and start returning to the one who never should have. You pause. Not to escape, but to see. Because everything you've been calling love, everything you've chased, endured, and survived wasn't just about them. It was about you. The parts you didn't know were steering, the stories you didn't know you were reenacting. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So ask yourself, who do you become in love? The savior, the chaser, the peacemaker, the ghost of your unmet needs? What emotion drives your attachment, love, or fear of being alone? What version of your past are you trying to rewrite with someone who was never meant to carry that weight? This is not self-blame. This is self-reclamation. Because once you see the pattern, you're no longer trapped inside it. Once you name the role, you no longer have to play it. The shadow loses its grip the moment you hold it in the light. And maybe, for the first time, you begin to love not from the wound, but from awareness. Not to fix, not to prove, not to survive, but to choose. This is the beginning of emotional sovereignty. When love stops being your battlefield and becomes your mirror. Not a mirror of who you've been, but of who you're finally ready to become. You say you're bored. No drama, no high stakes, no frantic texts or emotional cliffhangers, just stillness, softness, safety. And you wonder, is this it? Because after a lifetime of chasing chaos, peace doesn't feel peaceful, it feels suspicious. You don't trust the quiet, you mistake calm for emptiness, and you start to believe that love without suffering must be fake. But what if boredom isn't boredom? What if it's your nervous system healing? What if that flat feeling is just your body adjusting to the absence of adrenaline? You're not bored. You're unlearning addiction. You're recalibrating your emotional compass. From survival to stability. The storm inside you is quieting, and the absence of noise feels like something's missing. But nothing is missing. For the first time, nothing is broken. Jung wrote, neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. The chaos you called passion was a substitute for truth. Now that the storm is over, you're finally meeting the real thing. This is the beauty of boredom. It's not the end of love. It's the beginning of intimacy. The space where you don't have to earn love by bleeding for it, where your nervous system can finally breathe, where connection isn't built on fear, but on presence. It's not that healthy love is dull, it's that you've been conditioned to find comfort only in the fire, but you're not who you were. And now, peace can finally feel like home. There comes a moment, not loud, not dramatic, when you stop looking for someone to complete you and begin returning to the parts of you you left behind. Carl Jung called it individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole, of integrating what was exiled, of ending the war inside. You see, within you lived forgotten forces, the wounded feminine, longing, softness, intuition, buried beneath shame, and the wounded masculine, action, protection, purpose, hardened by pain. For years, they've fought, one chasing love, the other building walls, one begging to be seen, the other refusing to need. But healing begins when they stop blaming each other and start holding each other. When your softness is no longer seen as weakness, and your strength is no longer built on silence. This is the inner marriage, not a fantasy, not a fairy tale, but a quiet revolution of self, where you no longer abandon your needs to be loved, where you no longer perform to be chosen, where love becomes a gift, not a transaction. It's not that you stop wanting partnership, it's that you no longer need it to feel whole, because now you carry something stronger than desire. You carry integration. And the more whole you become, the less tolerance you have for fragments. The people you once chased begin to fall away, not because you're above them, but because you've finally come home to yourself. And from that place, love is no longer a rescue mission, it's a reflection. There's a moment, cold, clear, and final, when your desperation dies, not with a scream, but with a silence so clean it feels holy. You no longer beg to be understood. You no longer twist yourself into softness to be palatable. You no longer hand out access in hopes that someone will finally stay, because now you see it for what it is. Love without self-respect is not love. It's self-erasure. And every time you made yourself emotionally available to chaos, every time you responded to manipulation with empathy, every time you excused disrespect in the name of connection, you chipped away at your own dignity. But no more. Now distance is no longer punishment, it's protection, it's prayer, it's power. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And who you are is not a doormat with a heartbeat, not a mirror for someone else's emptiness, not a soul on clearance for those who offer crumbs. Who you are is sacred, and sacred things do not chase, they choose. Now, your silence speaks louder than pleading ever did. It says, "I see what this is, and I choose me." No drama, no final speech, just a closing of the door and the opening of your life. Desperation was the old language, but now you speak in dignity. All this time, you thought you were looking for them, for the one who would finally see you, hold you, stay when it got hard, love you in the places you feared were unlovable. But what if it was never about finding the right person? What if it was always about remembering the right truth? That the thing you were starving for was you. Carl Jung spoke of rebirth not as a return to innocence, but as an arrival into wholeness. Not becoming someone new, but reclaiming the parts you buried just to survive. And now you see it. You were never unworthy, just unheard. Never broken, just fragmented. Never too much, just never met by someone who could hold your depth. But you can. You can become the arms you always ached for. The voice that says, you don't have to earn rest. The presence that stays, even when you fall apart. This is not poetic fluff. This is psychological liberation. This is the integration of the self. The inner child is no longer orphaned. The shadow no longer feared. The need no longer shamed. Because now, you are the home. You are the anchor. You are the love you kept searching for in everyone else. You don't need to be healed by their affection. You are the medicine silence used to haunt you. Now, it holds you. What once felt like emptiness now feels like clarity. Not the frantic kind, but the kind that settles deep in your bones, still, certain, sacred. You don't rush to text back. You don't contort to keep the peace. You don't decode someone else's chaos to feel safe inside your own skin. You observe. You breathe. You choose. This is sovereignty. Not loud, not aggressive. It doesn't scream, doesn't beg, doesn't chase, it simply doesn't move for what doesn't honor it. Carl Jung once said, "Solitude is for me a fount of healing which makes my life worth living, because in solitude, you meet the only person you ever truly needed, yourself. Not the version polished for approval, not the one who shrinks for love, but the one who can sit in stillness and feel full. The silence becomes your boundary. The pause becomes your protection. The space between impulse and response becomes your throne. You no longer live on the leash of their attention. You are no longer ruled by the need to be understood. You carry your own understanding, quiet, unwavering, sovereign. This is the power no one gave you, and no one can take, because it was never built on their love. It was built in your silence. And now, that silence doesn't mean you're empty. It means you're finally whole. You're not angry anymore, not at them, not at yourself, not even at the story. Because now, you see it clearly, the pattern, the ache, the illusion. And for the first time, you're not dancing with it. You're not chasing ghosts. You're not confusing pain with passion. You're not trying to fix what never belonged to you. You didn't lose them, you found yourself. And that changes everything. Carl Jung wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And now you are becoming, not louder, not harder, not more guarded, but softer, stronger, wiser in the way water is wise, flowing around what no longer needs to be held. You look back with open eyes and steady breath, not to rewind, but to remember. The pain was the portal. The addiction was never to them. It was to a version of you that didn't know your worth, that believed love had to hurt to matter, that mistook survival for connection. But you walked through it, and you came out carrying truth. Now, your heart beats without asking permission. Your silence no longer fears the echo, and your love, the real kind, begins with you. This is not the end of a relationship. It's the end of an identity you no longer need. And this is what you were always becoming.